On the day my son's store opened, I handed him a bouquet. He took it, smiled for the photographers, and quietly said, "Mom, you're ruining the brand image." I froze. There was Daniel in a perfectly tailored suit beside his business partner Amelia, surrounded by reporters. And me, in my old coat from a clearance rack, realizing I was being asked to leave so I wouldn't ruin their photos. I had barely stepped inside the art boutique when the bright lights and the hum of voices hit me. Huge glass windows, pristine white walls, minimalist displays of what my son called a breakthrough in conceptual fashion. I stood right on the carpeted walkway leading from the entrance to the photo zone. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. Photographers darted between guests, chasing perfect angles. And at the center of it all, my son, Daniel Hall. His custom Milan suit fit like a glove, hair perfectly styled, a silk pocket square, embroidered with the brand's logo, neatly tucked into his jacket pocket. I stepped forward, smiling, nodding. He noticed me instantly. For a second, his expression shifted, surprise, hesitation, and then that same polished smile he wore for investors. "Mom," he said softly, stepping closer. "You came?" "Of course," I said warmly. "This is your day. I wouldn't miss it." That's when Amelia Woods approached, tall, in a floor-length black gown, bright red lipstick, a thin gold chain at her neck. She glanced at me, quick, measuring, with just enough condescension to sting. "We need to talk," Daniel said, taking me by the elbow, steering me a few steps aside. "About what?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. He exhaled slowly. "Mom, you have to understand. This is an important event. There are journalists, premium clients, investors. Everything has to look consistent." And my voice had cooled. His eyes dropped to my old coat and worn-handled bag. "You don't quite fit the picture." I stepped back, looking him in the eye. "Are you saying I don't belong here?" Before he could answer, Amelia's voice joined in, soft but cutting. "Perhaps it would be more comfortable for you to come another day. Tonight we want everything aligned with the brand's concept." The brand's concept. Those words landed like a verdict. I thought of the nights I stayed up baking cupcakes to pay for his courses in Los Angeles, of mopping floors in strange offices so he could buy his first laptop, of hiding my exhaustion behind a smile so he'd never know the cost of his future. "I understand," I said quietly. "I won't get in the way of your premium segment." I turned toward the door, feeling eyes follow me. Behind me, a camera shutter clicked. Amelia whispered something to Daniel. He didn't answer. I stepped into the San Diego evening, the air scented with ocean salt and expensive perfume, and I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. As I walked through the evening streets of San Diego, her words echoed in my head. The brand's concept. Funny, the concept this brand could only afford because of my calloused hands, sleepless nights, and debts in my name. I thought back to New Jersey, 20 years ago. A cramped, two-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a tired brick building, its windows overlooking a gray courtyard with a peeling playground slide. That's where we lived, me, Daniel, and his little sister Sarah. After we buried my husband, he died suddenly, heart attack, age 42. The insurance covered only the funeral. Everything else was on me. By day, I baked rolls and pies to sell. I started at 4 in the morning so I could deliver them to the local coffee shop by 7. The smell of dough and cinnamon filled the kitchen while the streetlights were still on. Daniel would sometimes shuffle in, still in pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, is this better than store-bought?" He'd yawn. "Of course," I'd smile, "because it's made with love." After baking, I went to clean offices, mopping floors, scrubbing carpets, hauling trash, home again to cook dinner, check homework, then out to scrub apartment hallways until late. I worked myself to the bone to pay for his design and business courses in Los Angeles. I still remember his excitement when he got his acceptance letter to business school. "Mom, I'm going to be an entrepreneur." His eyes were so bright, I forgot my aches and worries. I took out a loan to pay for his first year, then another, bought him a laptop, covered his rent, vacations, clothes for myself, never even crossed my mind. Every spare cent went to his future, and there was Sarah, quiet, thoughtful Sarah, who understood too early that her mother was always working. She helped at home, then moved to another state so she wouldn't be a burden. But Daniel, he was always at the center of my attention. I believed he would achieve more than all of us put together. I remember visiting him for the first time in LA. He was working at a small design studio. I brought him an apple pie. "It's good, Mom," he said, "but I have a client meeting today. And you smell like dough. Maybe next time." I brushed it off back then, thinking he was just nervous. But now, remembering it from the boutique doorway, I saw it for what it was. The first warning sign. And here I was, years later, standing under neon lights in the city where he was opening his own boutique, being asked to leave so I wouldn't ruin the picture. The son I had lived for all these years, the education, the rent, the first business, all paid for with my hands, my back, my aching knees. Something shifted inside me in that moment. Pain, resentment, exhaustion. They fused into something solid. It was time to stop being the background to his success. Time to stop being the woman whose name no one remembered when the ribbon was cut. Daniel had grown used to a world where everything was about polish. His loft apartment in Little Italy looked out over the San Diego Bay, concrete, glass, and minimalism. In the kitchen, a coffee machine you controlled with an app. In the fridge, 3 bottles of mineral water and a carton of almond milk for his protein shakes. He woke up at 6, jogged along the Embarcadero, showered, put on a crisp white shirt and limited edition sneakers, and took a cab to the boutique. Routine, discipline, image, everything about the impression he made. He had an assistant named Kayla, a delicate young woman with a tablet who could say, "Of course," even when she didn't understand the request. She knew his schedule better than he did. Which influencer was coming for a fitting, when to swing by the photo studio, the exact deadline for the San Diego Magazine press release. Once, Kayla called me for my apple pie recipe for a family-themed Instagram post for Thanksgiving. "Just the list of ingredients, Mrs. Hall. We'll rewrite it in your style." They took my story and put a filter on it. Even gratitude now followed the brand guide. Amelia was different. Born ready for the camera, Berkeley educated, interned at a Chelsea gallery, fluent in the language of the wealthy. She knew how to make them believe that buying a dress meant buying entry into an exclusive club. Articles called her a visionary, the face of the brand, a woman who changes the game. She handled collaborations, found models, launched capsule collections, inspired by the ocean or by the city's architecture. Daniel handled tailoring and numbers. Amelia handled the story and the image. Together they ran like a flawless machine, with no room for stray parts, especially human ones. Daniel's circle matched the image. Investors in expensive casual blazers, coming not for the clothes but for the feeling of a good decision. Influencers filming stories against the logo wall. Art critics waxing poetic about the tactility of the fabric. Even their sign maker had a Behance portfolio and charged like a sculptor. In this world, the main skill was being on brand, speaking the right way, looking the right way, smiling at the right angle. Sarah, my youngest, wasn't part of that world. She lived in Portland, worked in a school library, drove a used Toyota. When I told her about the opening, she sighed. Mom, he's different now. Not better, not worse. Just different. You're the only one still waiting for the boy in pajamas at the kitchen table. Maybe she was right. She'd built herself a simpler life. Books, kids, a garden, no press releases, just honesty. At Daniel's boutique, every inch was calculated. White walls reflected light, so everyone's skin looked flawless. Mirrors stood accidentally at precise angles chosen by a designer. On the counter, embossed business cards. In the fitting rooms, sachets scented sea breeze and white jasmine. The second room doubled as a studio, shooting platform, lights, racks of fabrics for backdrops. Every purchase could become an event, every fitting, content. The clientele didn't look like me. They talked about the color of the season, ethical production, the upcoming La Jolla show. They knew why a seam shouldn't talk and what silence from a tailor cost. Their laughter was bright, hollow, confident. I stood off to the side, watching Daniel move between them. Smooth, efficient, effortless. He no longer tripped over others' expectations, but now stumbled over his own roots. I noticed Amelia giving the security guard a glance toward me. If needed, escort her out. I wasn't making trouble, just existing. But in their world, existence also needed control. Sometimes I saw flashes of the past in Daniel, the way he adjusted his sleeves, just like his father before a shift at the Newark garage, the way he pushed aside an overly sweet drink, same as when he was a boy and I'd mismeasure sugar after a sleepless night. These movements lived in him like hidden stitches. But Amelia was his new lining. She knew how to unpick any thread that didn't match the collection. The hardest part wasn't the coldness. It was how quickly his world learned to function without me. When he was little, my presence fixed everything. Fever, nightmares, tears at school. Now my presence was a logistical problem. Someone had to adjust the schedule, hide the bouquet, pretend nothing happened. But something had happened. Long before Amelia asked me to come another day. It began when gratitude turned into content, when "Thanks, Mom" became a caption under someone else's photo, when Daniel said, "The pie's good, but you smell like dough." When the world I built decided I was dust on its display. And yet, I didn't hate them. Hate is too expensive for those who missed the last train to compassion. I simply watched, remembering, stitching the details together like a seamstress who knows you must see where the fabric pulls before the dress can fit. Their polished, merciless to the unfitting world had made the boutique scene inevitable. They lived for perfect shots. I lived in real life, and when those worlds collided, they asked me to step off the carpet, to stop blocking their light, to stay out of their concept, to hide the shoulders their light stood on. They stood side by side, my son and his perfect partner. Cameras clicked, flashes burned, guests laughed and raised glasses, smiles rehearsed, movements precise, words scripted. Not a stray gesture, not a wrinkle in Amelia's dress, not a hair out of place on Daniel. They were a picture, and I suddenly knew I didn't belong in it. I stood near the exit, pretending to examine a display of accessories, but really watching them, watching their world run on its own laws. Laws where catching the perfect light was more important than having the person who made that moment possible in the room. In that moment, the years behind their success played in my mind. The first tuition payment in Los Angeles, cash saved from cleaning jobs and night shifts, begging the bank for another loan, promising to pay early, selling my wedding ring, the only thing of value after my husband's death, so Daniel could buy his first industrial sewing machine. Seeing him as a student, surrounded by sketches at the kitchen table, me quietly topping up his tea, beaming at his first exhibition, even when only 5 people showed up, handing out flyers at a craft fair because he was too shy to approach customers. And now, in this glowing boutique, he smiled for the cameras with champagne in his hand, never realizing that everything around him stood on my hands, my back, my knees raw from scrubbing strangers' floors. I realized he lived with the belief that it was all his doing, his talent, his risk, that the money came from investors, forgetting that the first and only real investor was his mother, alone, without a team, without a backup plan. A cold, unshakable clarity rose in me. I wasn't angry. Anger had burned out long ago. This was knowing, sharp as glass, that I had been an invisible part of the machine, and they thought they could discard me now that it was running at full power. I glanced at Amelia, half-turned, leaning on the counter, talking to a reporter. Perfect makeup, easy laugh, every movement confident. She wasn't troubled by having asked me to leave. In her world, it was correct. It was on brand. And I knew, today, right now, I would stop being a shadow. While they posed and exchanged cards, I mentally opened a drawer in my mind, the one where I kept all the documents, contracts, stock certificates I'd put in my name when helping Daniel launch his business. Back then, I told myself it was just in case, if times got tough, if he needed my signature. Times had gotten tough, but not for the business. For me. Because nothing is harder than watching your child erase you from their success story. I looked at his camera-ready smile and saw the emptiness in it. He was smiling for the lens, not for me. My hand gripped my bag strap, holding myself in place. But the decision was made. I'd leave quietly. No scene, no shouting. Just the knowledge that I held the one thing that could change their world. Not revenge. Balance. And in my mind, I saw his smile vanish when he realized the brand built on my shoulders no longer belonged entirely to him. Sometimes the unnecessary part can stop the whole machine. I left the boutique as quietly as I'd entered. Outside, the San Diego air was warm and heavy, thick with the salt from the bay and the smell of fresh coffee from the cafe on the corner. Somewhere, a tram hummed, and on the waterfront, someone played the saxophone. The city moved on as if nothing had happened, no one knowing what had just unfolded under those boutique lights. I walked slowly to the parking lot, each step cooling the hot sting of humiliation, turning it into something else, cold, hard, and perfectly clear. In my glove compartment sat a slim leather folder, the one where I kept copies of important documents. I never trusted the cloud or a bank safe. Important papers belonged where I could grab them in an instant. Inside were the purchase contract for a stake in Holland Woods, registered in my name, stock certificates, an option agreement, giving me the right to transfer my shares to any investor without partner approval, letters from the lawyer who handled the early deals. I started the car, but didn't drive home. Instead, I headed to La Jolla, to a quiet, palm-lined street where my old friend Richard Collins lived. We'd once worked together at a bakery in Newark, back before he built a coffeehouse chain across California. He was the kind of man who never forgot where he came from. "Margaret!" Richard opened the door like he'd been expecting me. "Well, look at that, just when I was about to pour a whiskey." "Make it 2, I said, stepping inside. We sat by the fireplace. I took the folder from my bag and placed it on the table. "This is a stake in Holland Woods, registered to me. I want you to own it." His brows rose. "Margaret, are you sure you want to give this to me? This is your son's business." I nodded. "Exactly." He was silent for a few seconds, then slowly nodded back. All right. I know you're not someone who does this on impulse. I'll take it, but only if you get fair value. I'm not interested in money, I said. I'm interested in making sure they understand they can't treat me like I'm invisible. The deal was quick. Richard had a personal lawyer who drew up the paperwork that same evening. I signed with a steady hand, like I'd been doing this all my life. When the last signature was down, something inside me let go. The next day, at the Hall & Woods office downtown, a notice landed on Daniel's desk. The controlling share of the company now belonged to Richard Collins. No major decision could be made without him. I didn't expect Daniel to call right away. First would come shock, then the lawyer, then Amelia. They'd try to figure out how it happened, why no one told them. And then, when they realized it was all legal, panic. 2 days later, just past noon, my phone rang. "Mom!" Daniel's voice was ragged, like he'd run upstairs. Did you take the shares? Is this some kind of mistake?" "No, Daniel, not a mistake." "But You don't understand. Without your consent, we can't." "I understand," I cut in. "That's the point." Silence. I could hear him breathing. Amelia's voice in the background, telling someone to call their PR guy immediately. "Why would you do this?" he asked at last. "This is our business." "Ours?" I let out a short laugh. Funny to hear that after being asked to leave your opening. I didn't raise my voice. I wasn't angry. "This business started with my money, my work, my sacrifices, but you decided I didn't fit your picture. Fine. Now try fitting into mine." I hung up first. That night I brewed tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker on below. I felt no gloating, no regret, just peace. For the first time in years, I'd done something not for someone else but for me. The phone rang several more times that day. Daniel's cell, the boutique's landline, an unknown number, probably the lawyer. I sat in my armchair, tea in hand, listening to the calls go silent one by one. By evening, Sarah texted, "Mom, what happened? Dan says you sabotaged him." I replied simply, "I reminded him who built his foundation." The next morning, in the San Diego Union Tribune, I saw a tiny note. "Primary shareholder changes at Hall & Woods." No names, no details. Just a dry line in the business section. But I knew, for Daniel and Amelia, it was a bomb. That evening, the phone rang again. "Mrs. Hall?" The voice was cold, professional. "Lawrence Hayes, PR consultant for your son's company. We'd like to meet to discuss how to resolve the situation." "Situation?" I chuckled. "I own the controlling stake. That's not a situation, Mr. Hayes. That's a fact." "I understand," he said after a pause. "But surely you don't want to harm the reputation of a business you helped build." "Reputation is built on honesty," I said, "and they forgot that honesty starts with respecting the people who were there from the start." On the third day, Daniel called again. This time his voice wasn't sharp. It was tired. "Mom, I know we were wrong. That night, at the opening, we just wanted everything perfect. It's not an excuse, but you decided I didn't fit your picture." I finished for him. "We can fix this. Give the shares back. I can give you an official position in the company." I smiled, though it was heavy in my chest. "A position? After asking me to leave my own celebration?" "No, Daniel. This isn't about work. It's about realizing how easy it is to lose the one who was your foundation." Silence. Then softly, "I didn't think you were capable of this." "I didn't think you were capable of that," I said, and hung up. A few days later, I happened to walk past the boutique. I hadn't planned to go in, but through the window I saw Amelia speaking to a man in a suit. Her face was perfect, as ever, but her eyes carried strain. She spotted me, and instead of turning away, she came to the door. "Mrs. Hall?" Her voice was soft, but without its old certainty. "Can we talk?" "We already have, Amelia. You made it clear I didn't fit your concept." She hesitated. "I was wrong. We both were. But right now the business needs stability and investor trust. You can give that back to us." I held her gaze. "Trust goes both ways. You lost it the moment you decided I was a problem to be removed from the frame." She looked away. I left, hearing the door close behind me, and realizing that sound wasn't just the boutique door. It was the door to the part of my life where I'd agreed to be the background. That evening, Richard called. "They've realized nothing runs as smoothly without you. They're offering to buy the stake back for a good price." "I don't want the money," I said. "Let them live with the thought that control is in someone else's hands. It's a healthy experience." That night, I slept well. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because for the first time in years, I knew I could run my own life. And they knew it too. Part 8, Finale. A month later, I got a letter. A courier handed me an envelope with gold-embossed Hall & Woods. Inside, an invitation to a charity gala hosted by Daniel and Amelia. On the envelope, in bold, black letters, "Mrs. Margaret Hall, Guest of Honor." I laughed. Guest of honor, after being shown the door in front of everyone. After my own son told me I ruined the brand image. That evening I went. Not to see them, but because I knew it would be the final chapter. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Grand Del Mar. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, orchids on every table, the brand's logo in the center of the stage, Daniel and Amelia glowing under the flashes. When they noticed me, the room hushed. Someone whispered, "That's her, the mother." Amelia approached first. "Margaret, we're so glad you came." Her smile trembled. "Really?" I tilted my head. "Strange, since you worked so hard to keep me out of your shots." Daniel was already at her side. "Mom, let's not. Tonight is important. We've gathered people to support children's shelters." I pulled the leather folder from my bag, the same one with my share documents. Perfect. I decided to donate something too. And right there, in front of everyone, under the camera lights, I pulled out a signed transfer agreement, giving my controlling stake in Hall & Woods to one of San Diego's children's shelters. The room gasped. Some clapped. Others whispered. Amelia went pale. Daniel stood frozen. "Your brand now belongs to the children," I said loudly, so all could hear. Children who don't yet know what it's like to be thrown out of someone's life for not fitting the concept. Maybe they'll build something with room for everyone. I set the papers on the nearest table and walked toward the exit. Behind me, flashes, noise, voices. At the door, a man in an expensive suit, one of the investors, caught up to me. "Mrs. Hall, do you understand what you've just done?" "Of course," I said. "I got my dignity back." And I stepped out into the cool San Diego night, leaving them with their perfect picture, only now missing the one thing that truly mattered: control.